The converted man here. Oh, good. How do atheists explain evil by Creation Ministries International? Yes, there's not going to be so many things in this video that's going to irritate me. Anyways, I'm here to explain why they're wrong and how they're wrong about probably everything. Even Star Trek. What? They didn't mention Star Trek? But I bet if they did, they'd be wrong about it. Anyways, here we go.
G'day everyone, welcome to another Creation.com podcast, and this time we're going to talk about the problem of evil, death, and suffering. It's often an argument used against the biblical God, but is in fact a much harder argument for atheists to handle. Now, I'm Dr. Jonathan Safdie, and with me is
Eaton Halley.
So first of all, what is the problem of pain, death, evil, as understood? What do you think it is?
Well, it's basically the idea that look at all the suffering and death that's out there in the world. Mm-hmm. Why would this be here if, as Christians believe God is all powerful, he'd be able to stop all this evil from happening? And if he's all good, then he would want to stop all this evil from happening. And so they say this is just an incompatibility. It's more plausible that God does not exist, and that explains why there's so much death and suffering.
Well, kind of. I mean, it's either that God is not all-powerful and or not all-loving, or a combination thereof. Maybe it doesn't love and isn't powerful. But yes, another possibility would be that it doesn't exist, or at least that version doesn't exist.
And evil.
And yet Christian theologians have answered this for over thousands of years about...
Yes, absolutely.
Well, first of all, they answer the way the Bible does, that God didn't create it this way. But of course, the old earth people say that God must have created the world with death and suffering and evil. So they've got a real problem, but not us, guys.
Yeah, so we've written a number of things about this in the past, Jono, and people can access those in the show notes below. We'll post some of the links to articles we've written.
Yes, they actually have things in the description, but they're not citations. They're just additional things that they wrote. And no, I'm not going to cover those because, I mean, there's going to be nothing there. Anyways, get to the point.
So before we get into why this is a problem for atheists, let's just talk about what is the Christian response. You mentioned a part of it is that God didn't create the world full of death and suffering. He made it very good, Genesis 1:31, and death was a consequence of sin.
Okay, well, there's a lot of questions I have about that. Because, I mean, this is already, a departure from reality because you're asserting a young earth and all this, I guess. Okay, there's no death. All right, well, here's the thing. Plants are alive. And so the fruit that is connected to a tree is still alive until it falls off, at which point I guess it technically isn't alive. And that would be death, wouldn't it? So unless they are eating minerals, which were never alive to begin with, what is it that they're sustaining themselves on if there's no death? If you take the fruit from the tree, you've killed that fruit. You didn't kill the tree, but you killed the fruit. And that's still death, but I guess that death doesn't count or something. I don't know. Do you think they'll answer that question? Probably not. I said I had questions. I think that's a good enough question. So I don't know if I had other S's there. Probably do.
Any other thoughts come to mind?
Well, it's a missing premise saying that God would prevent all evil unless there was a good reason and a greater good in allowing it temporarily. Like, for instance, if he was to get rid of all evil in the world, that's all of us gone too.
Yeah.
Okay. If I wanted to think an atheistic thought, he gave me a splitting headache when I did it. Well, the atheists are probably protestive for that. He did that. So he could actually destroy all evil by destroying all of us. And also sometimes, like you have a dentist, you might extract a tooth, as I've had recently, to prevent a greater problem.
Like good.
Okay, well, jeez. You don't look, but if you're building from the ground up, like you're making everything, then you don't have to make it that teeth can feel thing. In fact, the reason that there's pain, they think, is sin. So I guess sin was so terrible of a thing that, this made it be that we would have to have pain receptors throughout our body, including our teeth, and that our teeth would rot, which I guess they didn't do in the garden, and therefore you'd have to get dentists to fix it. But would, this idea that, there's some good reason for it. Like with the dentist analogy, there's a good reason for the pain because he has to do the thing to get rid of the tooth, and that's going to be painful, even if, they shoot you up with Novocaine or whatever it's called these days. I don't know. That's just the name I know about. It's not actually called that anymore, but whatever. That's still painful. Well, if we had a way to do it that was unpainful, we would do that way. And the creator could tell us that, but it just doesn't tell us how to do that. We're trying to figure out ways to do it, but, that's us trying to stumble through and figure it out. So here's the situation. If the dentist absolutely knew a way to get rid of or fix your teeth without any pain whatsoever, but said, well, I'm not going to do it, would that be a good dentist? No, it wouldn't be a good dentist. It's a redundant question. Of course it wouldn't be a good dentist. Now, maybe the procedure is expensive or something like that, whatever. But they would at least say, hey, look, you have this option. This is a completely painless way to get rid of your problem. Do you want that or do you want the painful way? Which do you want? I don't know. How much is the other one? It's $5,000. Give me the thing. Here's the $5,000. Whatever. It depends. I don't know. But the analogy falls apart because the dentist doesn't have as much power as your God is said to have. So whatever pain is, quote, necessary, end quote, isn't actually necessary. And there are other ways beyond just destroying us that could result in a pain-free world. Here's a few ideas just off the top of my head. Well, first of all, get rid of the nerves that we have that allow us to feel pain. Now, of course, there's another problem that comes up because there are people that don't feel pain, and they have to be very careful in life because they can get injured and they don't know. So the reason you have these pain receptors is the thing called evolution, which I know you guys don't believe in, but it allows us to know that something is wrong. And so instead of it feeling terrible, it could just be like a nice little sound, like beep, beep, like hello, like your foot has encountered a nail. Oh, your right foot has stepped on a nail. Oh, thank you. And it wouldn't have to keep bothering you about it. Once should be enough, and make sure that you hear it, but it can be loud enough so that you hear it, like, or whatever. You hear it no matter what, like, right? Somehow, I don't know, you hear it in your brain or whatever. And then if like your brain recognizes that you haven't gotten anything to deal with it yet, it could remind you again in like, a few minutes or whatever. Hey, your left foot, now it's your left foot. I don't know what foot it was before. Your right foot, whatever foot it was, your right foot that stepped on the nail. You still haven't done anything about it. You are leaking blood. This is bad for you. Please go get it treated at the hospital or something, And then you get it treated and you're fine. And your body's like, the nail is now gone. You have been repaired, or whatever. And it wouldn't have to hurt, right? Because you're designing the system. Why not make it that way? No pain required. No elimination of human required. That's something that your God supposedly could do. And yet, but the pain is there because of some nebulous reason. Because it's not powerful enough to actually fix the pain. And that's just me, a limited human being, coming up with a solution. So what's your God's excuse? All right.
Parents bring their children to the dentist knowing that it's going to cause them pain and suffering, but it's because they have a greater good in mind. And God could be the same way. He could have morally sufficient reasons for allowing evil to happen for a time. Temporarily, he's going to do it away with it one day, but he is achieving a greater good through these things.
And the other
All right, so this goes against my personal ethic code, which is complicated, but part of it is that the means don't justify the ends. If you use evil, nasty, terrible means to get to good ends, it's not justified. So, let's say that, there's there's this pit, and across the pit is the cure for C19, but the only way to cross the pit is to get it. Well, there's many ways possibly to cross it, but one of the easiest ways is to have a bunch of people shoved into the pit until it's full. And yeah, that kills the people because, a few of them are dropping down to however far down the pit is. A few thousand people have to die. A few of them get injured. And then the rest of them can just pile on top of each other until I have a nice big stack of people that I can walk across to get the cure. But that doesn't justify the ends. The end, there's other ways to do it. And he's like, well, even if that was the only way to do it, it still isn't justified. It's like people, you would desire another way. You would look for another way. You would search for another way. Maybe that example's a bit, out there and ludicrous, a bit extreme, whatever. But I think that the stakes cannot be higher than asserting that, well, there, eventually it will go away, but that's eventually, and it will be made up for later on. No, that doesn't justify it. You can't justify it. So if I torture you for 20 years, but then I give you a mansion and a car and a vacation, and I pay for them all tax-free, it's all paid for, you have food in there, you have maids in there, butlers, whatever, all that's paid for the rest of your life. Is it justified that I tortured you for 20 years? No, because I tortured you for 20 years. The pain doesn't get negated by the good thing. So this sort of thinking that eventually it'll be made up for in the end just rubs me the wrong way because of my ethics. I just don't see it as a valid response.
The thing is the assumption that if God wants to get rid of evil, he'd want to do it immediately. But what about, that's what he's promising to do, that in the new heavens and new earth, there will be no death, suffering, or pain, because the curse will be abolished, and therefore evil will be abolished as well, right?
That's right. And I was going to read a verse, one of my favorite verses in the Bible, out of Romans 8:28. It says, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good for those who are called according to his purpose. And so, and the next verse goes,
I don't care.
Believers is that we're being conformed to the image of Christ, the bad things for good purposes in the end. And you see the same thing with Joseph in the story in the later chapters of Genesis, where his brothers, sold him into slavery. And yet at the end of later in life, when Jacob dies, Joseph forgives his brothers, but they're worried he's going to retaliate. And he tells them, what you meant for evil, God meant it for good.
Yeah, that's nice. Nice story, bro. But as nice and interesting of a story, and as far as I know, it's just a story, as that might be, did he really have to go through all that to get to that goal? Wasn't there another way that he could have achieved that status? Why not just have him born into royalty if you wanted him to become royal or in charge of something? Or just say, you're in charge. Boom. Bing. You are in charge now because I'm God and I can just make you in charge. Why not just do that? I don't know.
Of course, the ultimate evil was crucifying the incarnate Son of God, but of course that was meant for our good. That's how we are saved, through his...
Yeah, it is pretty evil. And the sacrifice isn't really a sacrifice. The blood, you just like, oh, it has to be killed in order for our sins to be forgiven. Because I don't know, it's just, why not just say your sins are forgiven? What's so hard about that? No, I have to have part of myself that's my son, or well, if you believe in the Trinity, it gets confusing. It's like I have to send myself to forgive myself, you know, or whatever. But you have to let your kid die a terrible way. Yeah, you're also going to bring your kid back to life, but you have to do that because there's no other way for you to forgive sin. That doesn't seem like you're that all powerful. It seems like you are constrained by rules that are outside of your ability. Now, of course, the apologist might say this is God's nature, to which I would say then God's nature is not all powerful, or at least not as powerful as I would think it should or could be.
Death and suffering on the cross.
Yeah. And this is not to say that we know necessarily every particular instance of suffering and evil that happens, why God allowed that particular one. There are many places in the Bible, like the book of Job, where we learn the lesson, not to assume it's because of a particular sin you committed. That's not necessarily why you're undergoing the suffering that you're undergoing. Or Jesus in the New Testament talked about how the man who was born blind, it wasn't because he sinned or because his parents sinned, but it was to show the glory of God when Jesus healed him and so forth. So we might not know all the details of why God allows particular instances of suffering, but we know in the big picture that God is good and that he can use these things for good. And atheists really don't have any ground to stand on here to say that they know enough to say that God can't have morally sufficient reasons for these things.
They'd have to.
No, I think I do know enough to know that this character doesn't have morally sufficient grounds. There is nothing that justifies the thing, at least in my ethical system. Now, you might disagree with my ethical system. Maybe you have different ethics. All right, we can talk about that. We can debate about that. But in my ethical system, it is simply not okay to have terrible, horrible things happen for a good end. That just isn't okay. There's got to be a way around that. There's got to be a way through it. And, of course, as humans, sometimes we have to do something terrible to achieve something good because there's no other option. But it's still bad to do it. You'd still feel terrible doing it. You want to avoid doing that. That's the goal of the ethics, is to try to avoid doing the bad thing at all, to all reason and possibility. So no, I absolutely do have a way to say no to it. I'm saying no to it. And because you're claiming that this thing has all these powers, and yet can't figure out a way to negate suffering. That it's like, well, but he's using the suffering for something good. Well, you can get to good without suffering, though, because if you know everything and you have all these powers, you can get to the ends in different ways. So it just doesn't. There's no way out of it, at least from my perspective, my ethical standpoint. And your ethics, I guess, must be very, very different, or your God's ethics are very different. But I'm absolutely in a position to judge it because I am judging it.
To be God, they'd have to be God, wouldn't they, to actually have this knowledge, but they don't, of course. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Why then is this problem of evil actually a bigger problem for atheists than it is for Christians?
That should be good.
Well, I mean, I've heard of the atheist philosopher Bertrand Russell saying, well, how can a clergyman go to a bed of a child cancer patient? One clergyman who actually spent lots of time with such patients said, well, what are you going to offer them? Tough luck. You've had your chips. That's the end. You're suffering and you're going to die and become fertilized, and that's all there is to it.
Yeah.
What are they?
Wow. Brilliant. What are you going to offer them? Love, compassion, sympathy, somebody to be with, actual truth and caring words. I don't think now would be a good time to be like, yeah, well, remember, when you die, you're just not going to exist anymore. Like, I don't think anybody reasonable would bring that up. You might say it a different way, like, soon you're not gonna have this pain because you're not gonna be. I don't know if that's comforting or not, but it's probably true. I don't really know for sure. I don't have any reason to believe otherwise. So, I would remind them that we're going to still think about them, and we're going to celebrate their legacy, and that, we're going to try to, tell their story, and that their atoms are going to be part of the universe. Well, they've been part of the universe, but they're going to be spread out into the universe, and that some of those atoms will be inhaled by myself and others. And so they'll become part of us in a way. And so, in a way, they're still around, sort of. I mean, they won't be aware of it, but, I'd say some nice stuff to them. But basically, you're saying, well, it's better to lie to people and be like, I just watched a movie called Invention of Lying. I've watched it before. Ricky Gervais. Very good movie. I recommend it. 5 out of 5. Very funny movie. Touching movie. But he's sad because his mom's dying, and he tells her that when you die, it's not nothing. You're gonna go to this wonderful place. Well, there you go. So you're saying it's better to lie to people and pretend that everything's gonna be fine than to just say, look, this is it. I mean, but it's all in the way you phrase it. But as far as what we have to offer people, whether we believe, now maybe the person that believes in the afterlife might happen to be right, but maybe it's a different afterlife. I don't know. Who knows, right? Well, they think they know, but maybe it's an afterlife without God, or maybe it's some other type of existence that we haven't even considered, that we wouldn't even recognize. Maybe, I don't know, maybe anything. I don't know, but that whatever it is we try to offer that person in that time is wholly independent from whatever the truth might be. So it might be the case that every minister tells the person that they're going to be with God soon, to try to cheer them up, and that might seem good to some people. And it might be the case that all atheists say, you're just dog food, baby. That's what's going to happen. And how people treat other people is independent of whatever the reality is. Whatever the truth of the matter is must be separated from how you are treating any given person or group. So this is essentially an emotional argument, somewhat of an ad ballium, like, oh, hey, Burton, what would you offer to the people? Oh, you think you're so smart? Or, whatever, Did he say Burton? I don't know. He said. Anyways, that's what my brain wants him to have said.
They have to offer nothing.
It can be emotionally powerful to lay that charge at the feet of Christians, but what's the alternative? That's so often when I talk to young people who have left their Christian upbringing and they move on to some other worldview, I ask them, okay, you've critically scrutinized Christianity and you think you see some problems there, but what about your new worldview? Have you critically analyzed that as well? What's the alternative? And atheism doesn't provide a good alternative to suffering. It says, this is just too bad. That's the way things go.
What? Atheism is just a description of what, it's just a label. It's just people that are atheists don't believe in God, and or they'll say there is no God. Either way, whatever. So that doesn't tell you anything more. It doesn't inform you of any other ideas. You have to figure all that out on your own. I don't know why you would. So I guess this is kind of true what he said. It's just the way he's saying it kind of poisons the well. It's like, yeah, atheism isn't a worldview. Correct. We're not going to be able to tell you what to do because there's no book, there's no anything. Being an atheist in and of itself is just your label. Just like being a skeptic is a label. And you usually apply that label to yourself. Maybe somebody else applied it to you, whatever. But regardless, it doesn't inform you of other ideas. You have to figure that out. As far as critically scrutinizing whatever your new worldview is or whatever your ideas are, that's a good thing. And yes, I have critically scrutinized my own ideas many times, and I'm happy to do so again. In fact, I regularly do so. And every now and again, I'll even look at old videos of mine when I was a Christian, and I'll make fun of them because I was wrong. So, yes, my view now of reality, yes, I scrutinize it, but I don't need to do it all the time. Once is usually good enough. But I'm willing to change my mind if you have actual evidence, like empirical evidence or refutable test or a valid and sound argument, which so far you haven't had any of those things, but maybe you will.
Well, and also, how do they even justify even the concept of evil?
Yeah.
If we're the result of, we're rearranged pond scum, the result of the strong overpowering the meek do not inherit the earth under evolution, the weak get crushed underfoot. So what does evil mean in such a worldview?
What? So the way that reality really is something you object to, therefore bad thing is true. This is called an appeal to consequence. So, as far as pond scum or whatever, it's so weird that they view it that way. Like, I don't know where life came about from, whatever. It's just so weird. It's just like, it's like, you gotta insult it. They have to insult it. Can't just be like, that's what you are. Okay, that's where you came from. You're not that now. So what? So what if your great, whatever, grandfather and mother were tadpoles? And if that's the way reality is, that's the way reality is. Who cares? That's just the way it is. But as far as what evil is, that is a word that we still have a definition for. And we can get into the complications of natural language, which is, I'm sure, something way above your guys' head. Not you, my audience. Them, the Creation Ministry International. Not that they would respond or listen to this video. But if they did, that sort of stuff would probably be above their heads. Not saying that they're stupid. I'm just guessing. I'm speculating. Maybe not. Who knows? So what was that point? What is evil? Evil is causing harm that is unnecessary. And unnecessary, is causing harm when you could otherwise avoid it. Deliberately causing harm when you could otherwise avoid it. Without some overarching reason that you have to do the harm, like in dentistry, where we try to negate the harm as much as possible. So it's do the least amount of bad to the least amount of things and do the most amount of good to the most amount of things, whatever that might be, however you might go about that. But, I would say murdering pretty much is pretty bad, but if we're talking humans against other humans, I think that's something that's pretty, whatever you wouldn't want done to you is probably a good place to start. Although you might want weird things done to you, and so maybe you might want to consider what other people might want done to them. And rather than just speculate or guess, you could just ask them what they would want done to them or not done to them. And those things might be codified into laws already, so you don't have to guess. But then you do need to learn those laws, perhaps. Or at least some of them, And maybe that could be a lot less complicated than it is, but, it is what it is. What are you going to do? Society is a complicated structure that we have, and there's many rules we're not aware of, and you can run afoul of them. But it's usually when you are doing things that you shouldn't, when you're trying to cheat the system. You're trying to get money for doing nothing, or that you're trying, it's something that if you're worried that you're going to go to jail for it, it's probably something illegal. It might not be, but um. So yeah, that's what evil is: doing bad things, causing harm when you didn't need to, deliberately, like going out of your or whatever, right? Like, okay, I routinely smash bugs into oblivion that get in my way. Like, I see a bug and it's like on my desk or something, that bug's life is going to get terminated if I am quick enough to do so. And I don't have a problem with that. Now, what I would have a problem with is capturing the bug and then torturing the poor little fellow, like pulling at its legs and poking at it and feel the pain, that was just unnecessary and just is kind of, I would say, evil. So yeah.
Yeah, we actually have a basis for saying why something is right and wrong, right? We can say the concept of goodness, it's grounded in God's unchanging nature. He's eternal and he's, always existed. And so it's not something frivolous or, that's going to go away.
Well, kind of, but the problem, well, there's many problems, but the thing is, you're just forgiven for doing all the bad things anyways. So is there really, you can do all the bad you want and then you'll be forgiven for it. So what sort of weird nature does your God have, actually? Because I don't know about that, but whatever.
It's grounded in something objective, that God is real and he's the standard for why we call things right and wrong.
Because the one thing you can't do is go from what is to what ought to be.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually called the naturalistic fallacy in ethics, and you just can't make that. Even the atheistic David Hume, he actually realized he couldn't make that connection, and yet some people are trying to make a connection which can't be done.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the movie Life of Pi?
Afraid not, no.
It's not coming from a Christian worldview, but it's kind of a philosophical, coming from a philosophical perspective. And the thrust of that movie is to say that atheism leads to despair. It's kind of a dark and terrible worldview.
Rather than citing a single movie that you think agrees with your position, here's an idea. Get a metadata study of atheists that have been pulled, asking them if they're miserable, or like do a psychological study and see if atheists have better or worse mental health than non-atheists. You'd need a bunch of them, 10,000 would be good. The more you have, the better your study, but, that would be a thing. Then you'd actually have some sort of something to back up what you're claiming here, rather than, just claiming it. But I will say this again. If it is the case that atheism made people sad and depressed and angry and whatever, that still would not negate it being true or false. How a thing makes you feel is completely and wholly irrelevant to the truth of that thing. So, what if teaching our kids about koalas made them go out and start biting on bamboo, and they started behaving like that because they learned about koalas? So therefore we better stop talking about koalas, because every time the kids go out and do this crazy thing. No. There's got to be that'd be weird, but there's got to be a way to solve that, maybe. But whatever their actions are, the actions of the kids is undesired, but that doesn't change the truth. So we could lie and say, koalas eat really healthy food, and then the kids would be like, hey, let's eat healthy food, yeah, because they want to be like the koalas for some reason. I don't know that koalas eat bamboo, eucalyptus, whatever. I don't know what anything eats anymore. Back to the video.
Flip side is they say, well, religion is irrational, but I guess we need to embrace irrationality because the alternative is so much worse. So I think they get it wrong that it's not true that religion and belief in God is irrational.
Yes,
but the other side of the coin they got right, that atheism does lead to despair. It doesn't give you a basis for objective right and wrong. And
well, okay, look, I don't know that atheism leads to despair. It may or may not. You have nothing to show one way or the other, and that would be completely and wholly irrelevant to whether it's true or not. And then secondly, that it doesn't provide whatever. Yeah, you're right. Again, atheism isn't a worldview. I don't know why that's surprising to you.
And give you the answer to the problem of evil. In their worldview, they don't have a God who's going to make all things right.
And as we discussed a while back, I mean, it doesn't give you a basis for rationality either.
Yeah. Which
yes, it does. Reality is pretty cool just the way it is without imagining things on top of it. Yeah, so I don't know, whatever. Keep going. You haven't, what's interesting about all this is this isn't really like, you're not even explaining like how we supposedly explain evil. Like, isn't that the video title? Is How Do Atheists Explain Evil? And then you could have, I don't know, had some atheists on to explain evil, or you could have pulled some clips of atheists explaining evil. But no, we're not going to do that.
Which we've written about as well. Well, why don't we talk about, I think one of the keys to understanding, if you ever challenge an atheist in a discussion about this problem, it's important to distinguish between objective morality from subjective morality.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're going to get into this insanity. What ethical system enables you to have that morality? Because the problem is, if you're not talking about ethics, then you're just talking about morals, like whatever. I don't know, what rules are you following for those morals? You need to have some sort of rule set to follow. That's ethics, okay? And there's plenty of ethical systems. So let me get up a list here. Okay, so all right, here we go. All right, here we go. All right, stop screen, share that screen, share this screen. Where is it? There we go. Hold on a minute. All right. Yeah, this is the thing. It's not working. Nothing's working. Oh, there it goes. Okay. It was. All right. So here's a few. Okay. Subjective realism, cultural relativism, divine command, which is their ethical system, and it has to be their ethical system. Ethical egotism, Kantianism, utilitarianism, rules utilitarianism, social context, situation ethics, and there might be even more than that. So yeah, that there's a list of some ethical systems. Which one do you have? Now, I said they have to have divine command because all their rules are coming from their God. So that's it. If God says to do a thing, you do it. If God says don't do it, you don't do it. So God could decide tomorrow to tell you to torture somebody for 5 hours, and you better go torture them. Maybe you think it's a test. Like, well, Abraham was tested that way, so maybe God's testing me. And you get there and you start torturing the poor person, and it's like, okay, God, it's like, what, you're gonna stop me any moment now. 5 hours later, what the bleep was that about? And there's been court cases where people have killed their kids because they thought God told them to do it, or they thought, well, in other cases, it was that they thought that the kids would go to heaven immediately. And of course, some people have said that the devil made me do it. And we just view those people as kind of crazy. So, yeah. Let's see. Going back to the thing.
Objective morality means that morality is grounded in the object. So to say that murder is wrong, that's based on the act of murder in itself is wrong. The standard is higher than you. It's outside of human beings.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas subjective morality would say that's just your personal preference, like saying chocolate is the best ice cream flavor. Well, that's true for me, but not for you. So moral claims like murder is wrong, that's not merely my preference. There's a standard that's higher than me, and that's what atheists can't.
Well, I mean, for instance, the Nuremberg trials, I mean, you got the Goering and co saying, well, what's the problem? I was obeying the laws of my country. And of course, they'd have to say, well, there's a higher law than your law, which is a murder and genocide is objectively wrong. But where do you get this higher moral law without a higher moral lawgiver?
That's right. It can't.
Well, we don't necessarily need anything. Well, we do have a higher giver because we have something that none of us as a individual is, which is society. Society is this nebulous concept. We working together have created society, and it's a thing, but it's also not a thing. But we have given powers to that society to make what we call laws, and then to enforce those laws, and to try to give people fair trials and hearings and whatnot. Now, the system isn't just far from perfect. I think there's many, many flaws in it, and it certainly couldn't be improved, but it's what we have. So that is bigger than me, because that's the nature of it. It's I have maybe a vote or say in it, hypothetically, and I hypothetically can try to get other people to agree with my ideas so that they change the law in a way that I desire or whatever. And some systems work differently than that, and some systems offer very little freedoms, and some systems offer a lot of freedoms, and some systems are a little bit of both, and who knows what system is best or better or whatever. And I guess we're trying to work that out as humans, and who knows if we'll sort that out before C-19 or the meteor takes us out or whatever it's going to be. But regardless, we're trying. So that's bigger than us, and we don't need it to be God. The problem is with God, well, many problems, but the problem with divine command theory is you don't really know what God said. At best, you know what the preacher or the book says that God said. That's not enough. So you reduce it to a singular thing. And the problem with it being, it's like, okay, so it's a written set of rules. That seems like a good idea, maybe. Yeah, but then there's ambiguity there. So one of them could be like, don't murder. Oh, okay. But murder can be eliminated by making the thing legal. So there's only murder if killing is illegal. Killing is not illegal during times of war against your enemy when you're ordered to do so. That's not murder. When a soldier shoots and kills another soldier that they're against, that's on the other side, obviously, that is not murder. It's killing. So you can say, well, in this and that situation, we can kill these people because it's not murder, because it's not illegal. It's only murder when it's illegal. So you have a rule where there's a way to get around it. So it's not as objective as you might think. Now, of course, depending on how you view the list of rules, it might say killing is wrong. Okay, great. But then you list like the consequence for doing all these bad things, like wearing mixed fabrics, is to stone people to death. It was like, didn't you say not to kill people, but now you're telling us to kill people? Which is it? And you can't say, oh, that's the Old Testament, doesn't count or whatever. No. Those 613 laws absolutely count. Because Jesus said, none of the laws will be done away. Of course, he also said all the laws are taken care of. So I guess you could decide which one of those is true. But that's another problem. And then you have another problem in that you think that your God says to do X, Y, and Z. Some other schmuck says, my God says to do Z, Y, and B. And maybe it's not a problem, but it could be, especially if their God wants everybody that's not part of their religion to die, which is something that Yahweh did in the Old Testament. Hey, that city over there, go kill everyone in there. Everyone. Male, woman, child, and their animals. Just wipe it all out. Just complete, utter genocide of everything there, and then take over the town, take over the city. That's something that Yahweh commanded. That's something that your God commanded. And you might say, well, there was some good reason or whatever for it. I don't care. I don't think there was, but whatever. So those people just living their lives, doing their thing, worshiping some other God or maybe no God or whatever they were doing, minding their own business. All of a sudden, here come all these people. What are they doing? I don't know. Hey guys, what are you doing? We're coming to kill you. Please don't. So, it's just a bad thing. It's a bad situation. And the ultimate problem is there's no way to resolve a conflict between two people that think that their God is right, because you can't prove which God is the actual God. Not through logic, reason, evidence, tests, nothing. Nothing can prove your God is true and that their God isn't true. Now, I know you'll argue about it, but they might not even give you the chance to argue about it, because they might think that their God is telling them to kill you, and then you have no chance. And they justify their killing of you because their God said it was okay to do, and they're following God's commands blindly, just as you're following your God's commands blindly. And so there is a significant problem in DCT, which is what you follow, divine command theory.
Even be rooted not just in individual human beings, but even in whole countries or the whole world. Even if everyone in the world said that murder was okay, it still wouldn't be. Even if the Nazis had won World War II and exterminated everyone who disagreed with them, they'd still be wrong about those facts because it's an objective truth claim. The standard is higher than us.
And also, we're not actually making a straw man here. We're actually going by what the leading atheists themselves say. Yeah. I mean, like William Provine said, if evolution is true, which is what he believes, there's no ultimate foundation for ethics, which means no objective right or wrong under an evolutionary worldview. And Richard Dawkins says things like, under evolution, there's no good or evil, just blind, pitiless indifference. And there's another amusing thing he did, which was about a British comedy. I'm not sure if you Yankees know about British comedies, but Fawlty Towers 50 years ago, a really eccentric hotel manager called Basil Fawlty. And there's one nice clip where he's actually gets so angry with the car that doesn't start that he actually beats the car.
Yeah, well, it takes a tree branch and just gets so angry at the car. Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, see, Dawkins actually had an article about that. Why are we laughing at Basil beating his car? Why do we laugh just as much as a judge who punishes a criminal? Because they're both defective mechanisms. And he says, under evolution, concepts like blame and responsibility, even good and evil.
Okay, I'm pretty sure you're quote mining at this point because, well, you are. What's interesting is you do give a link to that, but that link is not in your description, so I have to type in that, making it harder for me to go to that particular thing. But I don't know the full context of this quote, and honestly, I don't care. the thing is, you can have any number of prominent atheists say anything, and that doesn't mean that's what atheists are about, because we're not like theists. You could have William Lane Craig say something. He agrees with monolithism or whatever the thing is. Do you? No. He doesn't believe in the young earth. He thinks that's silly. He thinks that's stupid. And William Lane Craig is pretty well known. So I could line up a bunch of theists that are well known and respected, philosophers and theologists or whatever, that all disagree with the young earth and say, well, therefore you guys are wrong. No, it doesn't work that way. Their views don't inform your views because you don't agree with them. And whoever is prominent, however much popularity or whatever any given atheist has no bearing over my views. It's not how it works. Even, of course, with the Bible, you guys can't even agree with what that is either. But, so we could get a bunch of different creationists together and say, well, what is right and what is wrong, and see if they can agree to list out that stuff, right? And all, if they disagree, well, then what, right? So it's just this is such a weird dodge and derailment of the conversation. Like, you're trying, but it's not working here. This is what, I was complaining about earlier. It's like, okay, this is maybe an example of a atheist explaining evil, kind of, but not really, because, you're just, quote mining, perhaps, more than likely. But it's so weird. You have plenty of access to atheists and skeptics on the internet. Why didn't you have one of them come and talk and explain evil? I don't know. It's just like, how do you explain evil? Just ask somebody. But their explanation might be different than mine. And that's possible. So, yeah, I don't know. Whatever.
Are just the results of thousands, millions of years of Darwinian selection and have no ultimate basis in reality. Yeah. So this is a leading atheist, so the apostle of atheopathy, you might say, and he's admitting there's no ultimate basis for right and wrong. But then he says creationists are evil.
And right. And
I don't know that he said your guys were evil. You're wrong.
That's exactly right. So what they do is they talk out both sides of their mouths. I think they're just being inconsistent here. And oftentimes when you try to pin them down on this, they'll even in one conversation switch back and forth between affirming that there really are things that are truly objectively right and wrong on the one hand, but then you say, but how do you account for that in your atheism? And then they try to justify it by saying, well, evolution can explain these tendencies we have, it inculcates in us these inclinations to behave in a certain way, social pressures and things. But what that's doing is not giving an account of objective morality. It's saying that there are actually no real moral facts. It's just these social pressures. It's saying that morality is relative. And so
I know it sucks that you're wrong, but you're wrong. And maybe the reason that it seems like they're switching back and forth is because it's not as clear cut as you would like it to be. Maybe some nuance is required. Maybe it's a deeper, more complicated subject, than black and white. It might be that there is one thing that is, you could say, objective across time. But if everything else is subjective, then what? Does that mean that God sort of exists? Or does it mean that God exists because there's one thing that's objective? I just don't see the association causation that links the two together between God and objective morality, which you haven't made that argument yet. And if you do, I'm sure it's going to be full of logical fallacies, but you haven't made the argument yet. You're just alluding to this idea that supposedly objective morals mean God somehow. But whether there is or isn't objective morality or a objective ethical system, which there would have to be an objective ethical system for there to be objective morality. In fact, the way that you view ethics and morals can inform you about what you think. And I think that the ethical system is subjective because you have to select one of the systems. And then the morals can be objective in the sense that they point to the goal, whatever that goal is. So it's not clear cut in many cases. Stopping at a red light is usually the rule and usually a thing that you want to follow. But there are circumstances that change that, and that must be put into consideration. It's not just a black and white. You might say, well, but surely there's got to be something, and maybe we could agree upon something, but that's still an agreement. And you say, well, that's just subjective. It's like, maybe it is. So what? Why does that matter? But objectively, you could say X causes pain, and that's true across the human spectrum. But then you say, well, but there's this one person, like I said, there's people that don't feel pain, so they don't feel pain, so therefore that negates this. And it's like, oh, come on now, you're not being fair, because we're trying to make, it's like, so it just depends on how much you want to dig in your heels to get to the point that you're trying to make, which is that you want there to be a rule set that we all ought to follow. And maybe we are trying to figure out what that rule set is. There's a difference between authoritarian rule set and free thinking rule set. The authoritarian rule set, here's the rule, that's it, you can't do this, period. And the other one is like, well, there might be a situation where you have no choice but to do that. And so it's not this black and white thing, it's more nuanced and complicated than that. And I think it's just too simplistic of thinking to be like, well, why do you guys go back and forth? Because it's complicated. That's why.
So you can't have it both ways. You got to choose.
Well,
one
I
or the
mean, according to them, presumably Adolf Hitler and Mother Teresa are both the results of evolutionary process.
Mm-hmm.
How can one result be more correct than another result?
Yeah. And we ourselves have individual instincts to do, selfish things, or to, not get caught for doing things wrong. So if both are these instincts that have evolved, then the standard for good isn't from the instincts themselves. It has to be something outside the instincts to judge between them.
Yeah, society, as I said before, that does it. Now, as far as Hitler and Teresa, well, Mother Teresa didn't do very much good in my view. She watched people die. I don't think that was very good. Of course, Hitchens wrote a book about her, whatever. I'm just, whatever. Just, but as far as, what was the point? What was you were trying to say here?
Instincts themselves, it has to be something outside.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Outside yourself. Yeah. So society is outside of yourself. Okay. Now, so there was an Aztec society. And in this society, they routinely beheaded people for a sacrifice to their god in order to get better food or whatever. Now, we know that society doesn't exist anymore. So we could draw a fairly decent conclusion that maybe beheading people might have been part of the reason why they don't exist as a society anymore. That function just doesn't serve society because it doesn't bring about better crops, for one. So, there's not really a good reason to do it. And secondly, it's not so good for the person getting their head cut off. So that didn't work. Hitler, had he succeeded, had he won, if he didn't, overstretch, whatever, you can have an alternate history, all this, that society would not have lasted because eventually you wipe out all the problem people, and then what? Well, then you need more problem people, because if that's what's sustaining your society, then you always need some scapegoats. So today it's the Jews and the gypsies and the elderly and the sick, and tomorrow it's whatever. And if you go for the master supreme race thing, of all that doesn't work out genetically, C19 could have wiped them all out in a flash because they're not genetically diverse enough. So there's things where you go from a historical point of view that that it shows, as a matter of fact, that this idea doesn't benefit a society, and that societies that attempted that idea died as a result of trying that idea. They failed. That aspect of society failed. And there's many examples in history: socialism, communism, Marx ideas, and Mao, and all the there's terrible ideas in the past. The Christian Crusades, that didn't work very well for society, did it? Well, but it got a lot of people converted. Well, did it? I don't know. But the functionality of any given society can show you to some extent how well the ideas are doing. And so, yeah, you have to learn from history to do that. And, I'm sure that in the future, if, there's humans or whatever still around, they'll look back on this society and think we were a bunch of weirdos. And I be like, yeah, you're kind of right. But that is the bigger thing that you want, is right there in society. But then you complain because that's subjective and seems whimsical. In a way it is, but it will sort itself out in the long run, because societies that will not work don't work. So, and we're social creatures. We don't enjoy hurting other people. That has to be something that you're kind of like instructed to do. That has to be something that you're coerced into doing. Somebody somewhere will say, wait a minute, why are we doing this? That skeptical thinking, that critical questioning, which is something that we are seeing more people do, which is why religion is slowly shrinking, perhaps, is more people are becoming more skeptical. Now, they're not as skeptical as I might like, but they're getting there. So, anyways, we've hit an hour, and we're not done with this video yet. Bleep me.
Things to judge between them.
Yeah, that's the important thing. To see that they haven't got a leg to stand on, have they?
Yeah.
So what next?
One more thing we should touch on is sometimes when atheists hear Christians making this argument, they'll say, but as an atheist, I can still do good things. I can love my, children and my neighbor and so forth. Aren't you completely off base in accusing us of not being able to do moral things and to be good?
But this goes back to what we've just been saying. That we're not saying atheists can't do good things. We're saying they have no objective basis for calling those things good in the first place.
Yeah, they don't have a grounding.
Yeah, no, I do actually have a grounding, but this is we get a grounding and you don't, so we're morally superior nonsense. No, but here's the problem. Okay, so asserting a God, that somehow gives you grounding. Okay, the lobster is God. That's what God is. God's was a giant lobster, the original lobster deity, as explained in The Lobsters, which you can read if you want. It's on my About page. Check it out. Somebody make a video about it. Nobody's done it. Nobody's going to do it because it's stupid, but whatever. Anyways, so yeah, there you go. Now I have a God. Now I have an objective basis for my morality, which still says your morality is wrong. Now what? Now you have to try to convince me that God isn't the actual God because you want your God to be the actual God. And how are you going to do that? Well, you're going to need empirical evidence, repeatable test, or a valid and sound argument. You haven't made an argument at all in this video. You haven't even attempted to make an argument. I mean, this has just been nothing but assertions so far. As far as evidence, empirical evidence, you have none that you offered. You didn't you repeatable tests. You didn't offer any of that. You could have had citations of metadata studies that did psychological evaluations of atheists versus believers and who's more mentally sound or whatever. You could have cited those as an examples for your argument. You didn't do that. So you don't have anything to convince or compel any of us to think that your conclusions are correct. What else you got in the last few minutes?
For it. So
Let's
it's
get
the
a little
difference
bit
between
faster, shall we?
ontology. This is something we learned about in philosophy class in school. Ontology, which is the study of being, versus epistemology, which is knowing. Atheists can know what's right and wrong because they live in God's world. God gave them a conscience, like Romans talks about. So they can recognize good and evil.
Okay, you got epistemology basically kind of wrong, but whatever. Yes, we can know, and whatever. This is now we're just in precept territory, I guess.
They can perform actions that are good by human standards, but the problem is that their worldview, atheism, does not give them that basis for saying one thing.
Atheism isn't a worldview. You were just complaining earlier how atheism doesn't tell people what to do. That's because atheism isn't a worldview. Now you're saying it's a worldview. Which is it? You can't have it both ways.
Thing is right and one thing another thing is
well,
wrong.
for instance, I mean, one of my favorite anti-abortion pages is secular pro-life. They get a great example of why the human is a human being from conception, from fertilization, why it's wrong to kill human beings, but ultimately they'll lead you so far. And I applaud them for doing that, but I mean, again, under what basis can I say that killing a baby is wrong? And you have atheist philosophers like Peter Singer saying, well, yes, of course it's human, but so what? We should be more consistent and kill babies after birth as well.
Well, if you check out my video, Pascal's Baby, I give a pretty good argument for why killing babies under your system would be morally justified. I mean, if there's an age of accountability, and below that age you instantly go to heaven, then we'd be morally justified in killing babies. In fact, we should kill all babies because they go to heaven. Don't want to risk them going to hell. So, just saying. Anyways, I don't know where you're going with any of this.
You and I, but hopefully, once people say, well, it's wrong to kill after birth, it's also wrong to kill before birth. And he just turns the argument around in reverse.
Well, let's hit on one more thing.
Yeah, I don't care. Whatever. As far as abortion, it's a complicated subject. Maybe here's an idea. If you could fund research into ways to turn off the reproductive system at will. That would be a solution. If we had that, that would be great. If that was built into us, imagine if it was built into us that there would be a mechanism that only I can access that says, yes, I want to reproduce, or no, I do not want to reproduce. And if that was present in all humans, then no birth that was undesired would occur. But your God apparently can't do that. Science might be able to, but it needs research funding, which you guys might have some access to some serious money. So why don't you throw your money where your mouth is and, say, hey, scientists, develop this thing so we don't have to worry about abortion anymore. It's just an idea.
Here, and that is this challenge, this response that atheists, another one that they'll sometimes give is what's called the Euthyphro dilemma. And this is to say, well, okay, even if we atheists don't have a good explanation for good and evil, they might say, well, God isn't any better of an explanation because it just begs the question as well. They'll say, here's the paradox that confronts Christians. Is something good because God says so, or does God say that something is good because it is? Yeah. And the challenge there is, to say, if God say so, if that's what makes something good, then it seems kind of arbitrary. Like, could God have declared the opposite of the Ten Commandments to be what's good? Thou shalt commit adultery, thou shalt steal, etc. Whereas
We're back. Okay, some serious lag going on here.
Who were squabbling among themselves and were basically glorified humans with great power. Yeah. They were not the single God of the Bible who is a creator.
That doesn't matter. The dilemma still applies whether it's many gods or one God. So your way to negate the dilemma is just go, well, that was about a lot of gods, so it doesn't count. You guys are just pathetic. Oh my
everything,
word.
and whose own nature is found fundamentally good.
That's good. So it's really a false dilemma because
Yes.
it's setting it up as though there's only those two options when really there's a third, that it's not rooted in God's arbitrary say-so or a standard above him. It's God's own character, his very nature that is eternal and unchanging.
That's just your assertion. I don't really care. Yeah.
That's what sets the standard for goodness.
So things are good because God commands them, but God commands them because they are good according to his own nature, right? Yeah.
That's
I think avoids the dilemma
circular.
and shows that really God is the best explanation for this experience that we have with this realm of moral duties and obligations.
No, it's not really a good explanation. It's not even an explanation at all because you haven't demonstrated it to be a thing. Anyways, as far as good Bible quotes, here's one. None is righteous. No, none. No one understands. No one seeks God. All have turned aside. Together they've become worthless. No one does good, not even one. See, I can quote from the Bible too. So there you go. There's no one that does any good at all. The end. Yeah. And there's also something in there, and I can't remember where it's from in the Bible. But it's like, if you don't believe in God, that what you do doesn't matter, or something like that. That's in there somewhere. You know, I don't know. The Bible says a lot of things I don't care about anymore.
And good and evil, we recognize it's there because God gave us the law written on our hearts, and atheism doesn't have a leg to stand on here.
Which Romans 2 tells us.
Atheism isn't a thing in that way that it would have a leg to stand on or not. It's just a lack of belief in God. You're trying to make it a worldview, which it isn't, which you, forget it. Yeah.
Have no excuse. First of all,
whatever.
Romans 1
blah,
says,
blah, blah,
problem
blah,
of
blah.
evil,
Okay, this is just another
our Creator.
Yeah.
This is another assertion from the Bible that you haven't demonstrated to be true. However, the questions to be asked that you don't ask is, who is talking to whom in this? This is something being said to people that believe. It's not being said to everybody, is it? It's being said to those people. Anyways, are we done yet?
We've seen that the challenges that atheists lob at Christians are...
No, it doesn't win the moral argument. No, you don't have any good answers. You have detailed answers there, whatever. He has sufficient reason for allowing evil. No, he doesn't. Not even a little. There is no sufficient reason to do evil when you when you have the power to do otherwise. And atheism doesn't have sufficient answers for the problem of evil. Well, atheism isn't a worldview, so yeah, I don't know why that's a problem. And there's anything else Nitwit has to say before I'm done with the video?
Even though they can't escape living in God's world and encountering things that they're constantly throwing out these moral judging today. If you enjoyed this episode, we hope that you'll just click the thumbs up, the like button, and subscribe as well to get future episodes.
I didn't. I just liked your video. All right, anyway, so yeah, they're wrong about all the things, pretty much. Here's my, and I said it before, so I'll say it again. Why didn't they just ask an atheist? I don't know. Just an idea. Yeah. Exactly. So what's worse again? The New Testament never makes such a distinction between command and nature. Commands or mandates, full stop. Right. So their assertion about this is the nature of God versus it's, the law or whatever, it's just their own, ideas and they haven't proven anything. They didn't give us any empirical evidence or repeatable tests, didn't give us a valid and sound argument. I dare say they didn't really even give us an argument. And for those reasons, we have to be skeptical of their conclusion. And on top of that, the question of how do atheists explain evil, they didn't really even answer that. They cited a few atheists, like, two? But of course, that was probably quote mined, and they didn't put where they found those quotes in their description. Oh, sure, they had the one website on the screen. Of course, that's harder to access because I have to type it out, Make it easy for me. Just saying. Anyways, I guess that's it. Yeah, there's not much else to say. I mean, they didn't really go into the young Earth stuff too much, so I didn't get to complain about that. So I guess I'm done. And this is a thing I did. And if you want me to do a thing, let me know what that thing is. I might do it. Depends what the thing is. If I don't like the thing, probably won't do it. let me know in the comments below. Whatever you might want. Like maybe you have a video or a website. But if you post that in the comments, YouTube will probably eat it. So instead, email me websites and or videos. My email is on my about page. So you go to my about page, you could go there and do that. How do you get to my about page? That's a good question. Nobody asked that. I'll pretend that you did, and I'll show you. All right. So you're at my channel, right? So you go there, you see it says Deconverted Man there, and then I'm lagging. Oh, there we go. Okay, there we go. All right, it's working again. And then you hit this thing that says About right there, and then you see all these links. Now, you see this link, which is my blog, which you can't click because why would they let you click it? That would be helpful. And this is my Discord that I don't really use at all. And I'm probably just going to remove that Discord, so ignore that. This is how to become a lobsterist. You have to read this book, and then if you do, you're a lobsterist. And then you can buy my book at this link. Anyways, if you want my email, you click this, view email address, and it shows you it. But for you, it's going to have that check mark to prove that you're not a robot. But it knows I'm not because I'm logged in as me, and it knows I'm me. So it just showed me the thing, but it's deconvertedman1@gmail.com. And anyways, you can do that. And that's a thing. If you want me to do a thing, like I said, I'm going to keep saying thing until I hit the button. A thing. Post a comment. I already said that. I don't have money. If you want to send me money, I guess you could. I don't even know how you would do that anymore. But if you really want to, let me know. And I'll hook you up with a way to do it. All right. That's all. So long. Thanks for watching. Lobsters exist. Use logic. Thing.